Before you get too comfortable in your seats, I'm going to ask if you would please stand again for the reading of God's Word. From Exodus chapter 2, beginning at verse number 23. Reading from the ESV. During those many days, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning. And God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. God bless the reading of his holy word.
Yeah, I think that reading deserved an applause as well. Man, I am so grateful. Pastor John Rayford and Janai, they are just a profound people and a great example for what it looks like to be a pastor faithful to his church and living on mission outside of the pulpit as well. Thank you for reading, John. This morning we're going to be in Exodus, so go ahead and turn there. And you know that we're in a series called Pioneers. Today's the first day, so you're not jumping in the middle, you're jumping right here at the beginning. So that means if you're church hopping, you got to be here for the next 8 weeks or you're going to be out of the loop. So we are so excited you're going to be with us for the next 2 months. You had no idea, but here we are. So we're going to be in Pioneers series for the next 8 weeks. And really the focus of this series is what it looks like to follow God into the unknown. Let me explain a little bit about what a pioneer is. It's the best example I could think of. So y'all know I grew up fishing and still love to fish. My granddad used to go for a month. In his retirement, he would go for a month to back to the Gulf side of Florida, and we would go to a little town there, and my mom and I and my sisters, we'd stay in a little cottage there with my grandparents. And we made some friends in the area. You know, I've spent over a full year and a half, all collectively, and I mean daily, a year and a half worth of fishing daily for about 12 to 14 hours every day in Florida, okay? And that's not an exaggeration. Thinking about it over the years, I would spend a month doing that, waking up at 5 a.m., getting back at 9 p.m., and then trying to stay up all night to catch sharks. And so it was just a constant, brutal war wage against nature. And so I just had dreams of being Jonah and swallowed up by a whale. I had fish on the brain. And so I was really excited. One week we had a friend of ours, Dorian, who took us out on a boat. And he showed us some of his honey holes around the island. I'd never really been on a boat. I was more of a beach and bay fisherman climbing through trees and stuff. And so he showed us a couple of spots, but one of the spots I thought, that's like Pompano in the wild. I can go get some redfish and snapper very easily, and I could get there without a boat. So you know what I did? I gathered up all of my gear and decided to walk through the sand, which, by the way, back then, I was like $189. I couldn't gain weight no matter how much creatine and protein. I know you can't believe that now, but back then, it was difficult. And I had about 60 pounds of gear on my back. So, I mean, it was like Navy SEAL level work to get there. And I was trudging through the sand. My brother-in-law will tell you, sometimes we were crazy enough to like also carry a cooler because we were going to be out there all day. What were we thinking? I don't know. We should have taken some MREs or Snickers or something, but we needed a full cooler. So we get out there. I got out there because I was determined to find this spot. That was the destination that I was determined to find. And so I would kind of climb through these mangrove trees, going down this little sandy path up a state park on this little narrow island right next to the mainland of Florida. And I would trudge through it just getting torn up by mosquitoes. And it was incredible. It was awesome. It was like being in Vietnam, I'm sure. And so I would get out there just bloody, sweating, and I finally found the spot. There was a little fallen tree right under the water. It was clear. It wasn't like Galveston, that's a lake, but it was the beach, actually. It was the ocean, and that was a joke. If you like Galveston, it's fine. It's not the ocean. So so I could see through the water. I know, it's hard to believe, but you could see through it, and I could see the spot, and I was like, that's it. And I was catching fish, and I had pioneered a new spot. And so my brother-in-law, Dan, would go with me, my sister would go with me, and I had to mark sort of the space. But that's what it means to be a pioneer, right? To find a new, now some of you are rolling your eyes like you're not a pioneer. You know what I mean by pioneer, okay? We're talking covered wagons, we're talking difficult, going through uncharted territory where no man or woman has ever gone before, right? Going into the unknown and charting a new path to get there. Same goal. Same goal, to live and to prosper in a civilization, right? You also know what a pioneer is in different industries like business or finance, or you think about technology. You think about Steve Jobs, and maybe he wasn't necessarily the engineer behind new technology, but they would take technology that was being developed and they would try to create something that everybody wanted. You know that maybe it's with rocket ships, with Elon Musk. He didn't invent the rocket, but he sure figured out how to take a rocket into space and make it land again. There are pioneers. We understand the meaning of the word. And so when I was reading Exodus about 2 years ago and really praying about what the first series of Hillcrest would be, if this was the Lord's will for me to become the pastor, is this really the book, the path that God wanted us to chart here at the beginning? And about that time, I heard a song, and it just so happened to be called Pioneer. And so let me read to you some of these verses, because this is actually how I felt reading Exodus and reading the book of Acts and thinking about this season of our church. The song goes like this: miles and miles on a treadmill mind. I'm running, but I'm not going anywhere. I closed the blinds on the frontier life and I dressed it up as freedom, but it's actually just fear. I lost sight of who I am and why I'm here. So free me from this fortress, this prison that I've made, my civilized salvation, and my white picket fence of faith. My eyes on the horizon, I can't settle here. How could I die in safety? I was born a pioneer. The guy who wrote that song for Christians who feel like they have gone to a place where they're going through the motions. They've come to a place where God exists to help them feel better, but they have lost the plot of the mission that God has put us on. Because Jesus is the author and pioneer of our faith, we are now called in salvation to be pioneers of the faith to the community and the world around us. That is where we're going. Pioneers take risks in step of faith. Pioneering means to journey into new territory. It means a shared vision to take new ground for the kingdom. It means generosity to the degree that no one has any need around us. That pioneers are not ignorant of the challenges. They just see obstacles as opportunities for God to show His power and work big. That's what it means to be a pioneer. So we're going to be in the life of Moses, and some of you just came from Sunday school where you already heard this. So let me do a very brief bio for Moses. There's been 400 years since Joseph and a new king rose up, a new Pharaoh rose up in Egypt, who did not remember Joseph. And so what happened was he realized that the population of Egypt was being outpaced by the population of the Hebrews. The Hebrews, remember, they didn't have the Old Testament. Moses probably wrote the first 5 books of the Old Testament. We call that the Penta, meaning 5, Pentateuch. The first 5 books of the Bible. And so they didn't have a Bible like this, but somehow they had preserved their culture and even maybe some beliefs about Yahweh or about this God of their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You actually see their names mentioned 4 or 5 times in the first couple of chapters of Exodus. So they have maintained a subculture of what it means to be a Hebrew. But they don't really have an established strength of religious belief or faith that's necessarily clear yet. And so what this Pharaoh does is he realizes they're being outpaced, and so he decrees genocide. He says, I want you to throw all the male babies into the river. Y'all know the story. You've seen The Prince of Egypt, which, by the way, is not biblically accurate, as my mother tells me every time I let the kids watch it. But it is not biblically accurate. But you know the story that the Pharaoh had babies thrown in, and so one mother says, I have to preserve my son. And so for 3 months she's able to hide him, but then it just becomes too much. So she puts him in a little miniature Noah's Ark. She puts him in a basket. And actually the word that's used there, putting him inside of the basket, it's the same phraseology from Genesis 6 where Noah gets into the ark and seals it up, and he is sent toward the area where the Pharaoh's daughter is washing. And so the Pharaoh's daughter finds this little babe, and look at how meticulous God's planning it is in the fine-tuning of his plan. Who would find Moses but the daughter of Pharaoh? And then not only that, but the daughter of Pharaoh says, I found a new plaything, but I can't raise him. So what if you found one of those nursing mothers among the Hebrews and had her raise him? And who did they ask? Moses' mom. So he is raised by his own biological mother, but he gets some of the rights and privileges thereof of being a prince in the palace. And so what is happening here is God is orchestrating something powerful. He's setting something up big, and he has wired Moses. You'll see through the story and through this series, he has wired Moses with a desire to deliver people, to bring deliverance. He is a deliverer by nature. Now, we have some people in the room, I know you well enough, you have a tendency towards math. And I don't know why, but I'm grateful for you because you keep my head screwed on straight, Lori, and I'm so grateful for you. Some of you have a tendency towards athleticism. Some of you, this goes deeper than that. It's down to the nature and nurture of his inner being. He is a deliverer, and so as he's raised up, he starts noticing that his people are being oppressed, and one day he notices an Egyptian guard beating a Hebrew, and what he does is he runs in to be that deliverer. And so he takes matters into his own hands with his own God-given longing and desire, and he commits the worst sin of his life. He kills the guard, and then, just like Adam and Eve hiding in the bush, he hid the body in the sand and ran because someone saw it and said, isn't this the guy? Are you going to kill us too? So he now has a people who are his own people, the Hebrews. He doesn't have a home there because it was Hebrews that said, it was a few Hebrews that said, isn't this the guy that killed the Egyptian guard? So he has an identity crisis. He doesn't have a home in the palace because he killed one of his own. He doesn't have a home with his ethnic background. He doesn't have a home with the race that he comes from, the people, the religion. He doesn't have a home. And so now, just as the nature of sin, he runs far away, 300 miles away, into the distance, into the desert. He has no hope of even hearing if the Pharaoh or any of those people die off or there's a reason to come home. He has no plan to return. Okay? He has no plan to return. So the first point I want to point out is, by the way, I don't know if you noticed this, but I'm very old school, and I love to do fill in the blank. So these were at the door, and if you missed it, it's too late. But next week, you can grab it, all right? And on the back side, there's some, there's a QR code for events, and there's some, I know, it's like a bulletin. Don't call it that, all right? It's just a note page, all right? But if you look in your bulletin, you'll see the first... The first point is this: what we run from and keep hidden or avoid talking about disciples us in the quiet. It disciples us in the quiet. You know that it's discipling Moses because not only does he not have a plan to return, but he names his son foreigner. In Hebrew, it's the name Gershon. And the name Gershom is the name, Hebrew name for foreigner. And so he is living into the shadow of his past. He is planning on sticking around and being a foreigner in a nation that is not his own. And now he is projecting that onto his kids. Now I know none of you would do that, but some of us who have trauma or struggle or things that we have gone through in our background, we end up projecting those things onto our children without realizing it. That's when sin becomes generational. And so the responsibility of being a parent is bigger than you realize because you have the potential to speak life into your child or to project the same struggle that your parents projected onto you, and on and on and on it will go. Because what you run from and keep hidden and unprocessed in the quiet, you keep it secret, still disciples you in the quiet. And not only that, it even says that he doesn't circumcise his son, Gershom. And so God is even angry about that because that was still the sign of what it meant to be one of God's people. That was one of the ways that they were preserving and being set apart. And so what we run from and hide from other people and we ignore, it still forms us in the secret places of our life. And listen, God will often meet us there and bench us to teach us and to retreat us in order to renew us so that he can use us. But Moses ain't ready yet. Moses is not ready yet. And you know how we know that? Here's the truth, is because Moses doesn't see it yet, but God is still working even when we think something has halted our story. God is still working even when he thinks something has halted his story. He goes out and before he has a son, he goes to a well for water and he sees these shepherds bullying these daughters who are trying to water their sheep. And this is how you know Moses wasn't no chump, all right? He probably looked like Lance up here. I mean, he drove off these dudes who were known as some bad boys in that day. Shepherds were rough around the edges. They were blue collar, they were rough, they were strong, they had to handle themselves. And so this pampered prince somehow knew how to fight. So maybe they practiced jujitsu at the palace, I don't know. But he drove these boys away and rescued, again, delivered some people from oppression. Now you notice that when you operate outside of God's will in your gift, you're going to win some and you're going to lose some. It's not always a loss. I think in church sometimes we think, man, if you're operating without God, you'll never be blessed and you'll never, and then you realize, man, there are so many corrupt people who have everything it seems like they have everything they want. Because God will give you over to what you want more than Him. He won't force you to love Him. That's why the cliche that the gates of hell are locked from the inside. God's not going to force you to love Him. He's going to give you what you want. And so what happens is He delivers these girls and He meets the dad, Jethro, who's the high priest of Midian. And so what happens is Jethro allows Moses to become a sheep herder for him and to marry his daughter, and he lives there for 40 years. So by the way, youth, don't zone out because it's not irrelevant, but this is a story about a senior adult, all right? And many of your heroes are, actually. Many of the heroes in the Old Testament are senior adults. Last week was about Joshua. He was a senior adult in the story that we read about last week. So what I told the first gathering was this: senior adults, if you're on the bench of the gravy train of retirement, you are outside of the will of God for your life. But that's not for you this morning. There aren't any senior adults in here, are they? Happy retirement, Vern. We're going to use you around here, brother. You and those earrings. So, hey. Yeah. I got to get back on track. Come on, stay the course. All right, here we go. Listen, when we think our story has been halted by a mistake or someone else's mistake, a business deal that went south, a financial decision that we thought was going to bring wealth and it ended up draining the accounts, that marriage that you thought was in a good place and then it just spiraled over the course, maybe not even in a moment, just the course of 10 years, you just grew apart and you realize we built our whole marriage on these kids and now that they're gone, do we even know each other? And you just decided to quit. I don't know what desert you're in, but God in this moment feels oddly missing because in these first couple of chapters you really don't see God's name mentioned. You also don't see Pharaoh's name ever mentioned in the entire book. You know why? Because the most powerful man in the world, the king of Egypt, will not be mentioned in the same book where God gives his name, the I Am. But that's a different story for another time. But God is oddly missing. God has taken Moses to class, and he's the professor, but the professor seems to have not shown up. He is gone to a place where Moses has made a horrible mistake, but you don't realize it, but God is actually still working. This is what we call divine providence, the mystery of providence, where there is this broken and evil world. Some of these things are self-inflicted. Some of them are we are the victim. And what happens is we have victimhood and oppression in this sinful, broken world. And sometimes it's not even oppression or sin, it's disease. It's this world is busted. And yet, God is still working His plan simultaneously, not to twist those evil things to make them good, but His good plan is still happening despite the evil brokenness that's taking place. I don't know how to explain that to you other than it's just happening simultaneously. How does that work? How do you prepare a guy to lead people for 40 years to shepherd people in the desert? I don't know, but maybe living in the desert for 40 years and raising up sheep and learning how to protect the sheep and really be the only real good leader in the group because the other sheep don't lead themselves very well. Maybe that's a good training ground, I don't know, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. It's the divine mystery of His providence that He is still working. Who can say to God, "What have you done?" Who counsels Him? Man plans his way, but the Lord determines his steps. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Not God twisted it for good or God changed it for the good. No, you meant it for evil, and somehow, miraculously, in the brokenness of humanity, God is so powerful and so sovereign that He is able to work in the midst of evil and brokenness and bring redemption stories through it. I don't know how He's going to do it, but at the end of all things, we are going to stop at the gates of heaven and look in the past and know all of the story and all of the evil that has ever happened, and it's going to be okay. You might be saying, how is that even possible with how horrible the news is today? With how horrible and broken and evil things are. If He was a loving God, He would step in. I don't know why He doesn't fix all the problems, but I do know that He will in such a way that we will look back and say, okay, God, you never condoned evil. You never said evil was good, and you never did evil. But somehow His redemption story is leading to all things being reconciled to Himself. That was the deep end, so let's pull it back a bit. But let me just say this, God's plan is meticulous and it is carefully planned. It is unfolding. And so it's in the desert classroom. This is the next note in your note page today, but it is in the desert classroom where we are prepared for our assignment. Where we are prepared for our assignment. I mean, I think about my own life. My grandfather and I were best friends, and I loved him. And yeah, we had a huge generational gap, but we got a great opportunity to spend a lot of time together. But how did that happen? When I was 6 years old, my dad abandoned our family. He was a deacon at our church, super involved, and one day he just decided he didn't want a family anymore, and he disappeared. And so my granddad and I got somewhat close. Our family was kind of close, and as I grew and started fishing on the beach and on docks with him and stuff, I would start to say, "Granddad, can you disciple me?" And he said for the first time in 60 years, he had heard that question. He'd never been asked as a pastor to disciple someone, not directly. And so he started discipling me, and a lot of it was just learned from watching him, but we had a close relationship. And then guess what else happened is that later in life, when in college, he found out he had a diagnosis of terminal cancer. And so I started being his ride to go to First Baptist Stephenville so he could be the interim pastor. And this whole time I'm watching my grandfather die, I'm seeing the glory of God squeezed out of this man, because through death, he is still proclaiming Jesus, and he is still telling people this is the way to life. And I'm going to be dead in a few months, but I'm going to see Jesus, and you can see Jesus too one day. And so I saw that, but none of that would happen if my dad hadn't left us and if my granddad hadn't had cancer. Does that mean it was God's will, moral will, for my dad to leave our family? The Bible says that a man who doesn't provide for his family is worse than an unbeliever. So I don't think that's God's moral will for that to take place. But I do think that God in His divine sovereignty, knowing that this was happening, He also knew that this was going to happen, and somehow they're threaded simultaneously. And God, in his heavenly way, he has done this in Moses' life. He is running from the worst sin of his life, and God is preparing him for the future. It's like I shared this in the first gathering, but I don't think it landed because I didn't know what I was talking about. But he's almost like pulling a Miyagi, all right? Mr. Miyagi comes in, and it's the wax on, wax off for Moses. It is, here's how you herd sheep. Here's how you protect sheep. Here's how you survive without water. Here's what you do to go into these foreign lands, into these spaces. And so God is doing the wax on, wax off in a much more ultimate way. This is no accident. This isn't a story about a man who's making lemonade out of lemons in his life. That's not what this is. It's not a self-help story. Because you see, again, open your Bibles again, Exodus chapter 2, verse 23, it says, during those many days the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery. They cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning. So notice this. God did 4 things. He heard. God heard their cry. He remembered his covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And he saw the people of Israel. And it says that he knew. He knew. See, God approaches us. God is approaching his people. God is about to approach Moses through the burning bush. God is the one who approaches us. Moses is about to get a job he never applied for. Okay, Moses is about to win an election that he never entered into. Moses is getting signed up for a class in a college that he definitely never submitted forms for. And so this is what I want to tell you this morning, is that all true momentum, spiritually, eternally, kingdom-wise, all true momentum comes from God. If we try to push the ball forward, then it will be all up to our power. But if we push the ball forward knowing God has called us to this, and it's not really us, but it's God working through us both to do his will and good pleasure. That's Philippians 2:13 and 14, that he is at will and to work for his good pleasure through us. Then the ball that we push forward is going to be God's will, and we will make an eternal impact, and lives will change, eternities will change, the city will change, because we are taking Jesus back to the city. And so one of the reasons why we're doing this series called Pioneers is because I believe God has called us to take the same ancient lantern down new pathways. God has called us to the city, to take Jesus to the city, because he wants to tell a new story through our church, but with the same ancient truth of the gospel. All momentum comes from God. Spiritual momentum in your personal life, it all comes from God. All momentum spiritually in our church comes from God. All movement that we need to see in this church, healing, revival, holiness, passion, an increase of faith in our prayer, all of it, he is the source, or we're playing games. We're playing games. In James 1:17 says it this way, whatever is good and perfect is a gift coming down to us from God our Father, who created all the lights in heaven. He never changes or casts a shifting shadow. So let's move into Exodus 3 here, because I'm taking too long. That was the intro, by the way. So here you go. Just kidding. Exodus 3. Now, Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock west of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of the bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning, and yet it was not consumed. Moses said, I will turn to the side to see this great sight, this bush that is not burned. But then the Lord saw, he turned aside to see God and called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses, he said, here am I. He said, do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham and Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. We're going to come back to that, but here's what I want to point out. Look at this encounter. God comes to Moses through a burning bush, and Moses knows it's something happening that's divine. And what happens is God says, I want you to lead my people out of slavery. I want you to deliver my people. This is the time. You're the guy. That's why you have this desire. You've always had this desire to deliver. And he's like, hey, can you be quiet? Don't say that too loud. And let me show you why he says that. So the first thing in verse 11, it says, but Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to the Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? I'm a lowly sheep herder. You want me to go to the most powerful man in the entire world? What are you talking about? So the first thing he does is Moses questions his identity. He questions his identity. And I don't mean he's questioning his own power. I mean, he's questioning his identity as someone called by God, a child of God. Then in verse 13, it says, then Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, they'll say, what is his name? What shall I say to them? I don't think he's saying they're going to ask genuine questions of curiosity. Well, what God was this? I don't think that's what he's saying. He's being a little bit sarcastic, I think. I think he's really questioning God's power. Who are you to call me? Who am I? Who are you? And then in verse 1 of chapter 4, it says, then Moses answered, man, this guy, he is Eeyore to the max. But he says, Moses says, but behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, the Lord didn't really appear to him. So now he's questioning God's people. He's doubting God's people. And then in verse 10 of chapter 4, look at verse 10. It says, but Moses said to the Lord, oh my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and tongue. We know that from the Septuagint, he was talking about a speech impediment that he had. So Moses struggles not only with questioning his identity, questioning God's power, doubting God's people, but now he's struggling with his limitations, his limits. He says, I'm not a good speaker. And then lastly, this is my favorite one of all of them. In verse 13, he basically says, pick somebody else. Can you pick somebody else? Pick somebody else. It's a great destiny. Can you go pick somebody else? And so he avoids the mission. He avoids the mission. And so this is the patience of God, is that each time God gives him an answer. He gives him his name. I am. Tell them I am sent you. He says, take that rod, throw it on the ground. He turns it into a snake. He shows him different things with his hand and a disease and making it appear and disappear. He's showing him, he says, you can even use your I know in the cartoon it wasn't this way. Aaron was kind of a rude person in the cartoon, but Aaron actually becomes his spokesperson, all right? Aaron is his brother, and he's going to rise up and be a speaker. God is so patient with this guy, so patient with this guy. That's how you know Exodus is a story where God is the hero, not Moses. That's in your notes. Exodus is a story where God is the hero, not Moses. Hillcrest's story is a story not where Jordan is the hero or our people or the heart of our church is the hero, but God is the hero of our story. When you're, let me illustrate this, but when your perspective is off, when your perspective is off, you will think things are bigger than God. I'm going to do an illustration. Now, the first gathering did this really well, so try to do this without talking. I want you to put your hand up about maybe 2 inches from your face. Now, don't hit your spouse's hand into their face or youth. Easy now, all right? I see you already smiling. All right, about 2 inches in front of your face. And so right now, I don't want you to say what truly is, but what looks bigger, your hand or this stage? Hang on, wait. If your hand is in front of your face, do this again. You guys. Y'all need to come to VBS this summer and learn how to do hand motions, all right? Hand in front of your face. What looks bigger, your hand or this stage? Your hand. Your hand looks like it's the size of Mount Everest. You know why? Because your hand is closer than the stage. Your focus is on your hand. Not only that, you're nearest to your hand. When you are nearer to your problems than you are to God, your problems are going to seem to be more powerful than God. And what the story of Moses is, God is getting into Moses' face. And here's the cool part. I love this. God delights to take our limited power and resources to do the impossible. You know, Noah is not a story about some guy getting prophetic meteorology downloads from heaven and getting into wood carving, right? Like, you know, that's not the story of Noah. Abraham is not a story of a polytheist waking up one day and just deciding, you know what, I think I'll follow God in faith. Joseph is not a tale of a guy who got an ag degree and loves heroics. David is not a story about a little boy who has impeccable aim and loves cutting royal fabric from king's robes and caves. The story of Peter is not a story about a fisherman who realized he missed his calling as a public speaker. Paul's biography is not a tale about an influential leader who woke up one day and thought, man, I'd really love to get stoned almost to death several times and have to escape from my life daily. And your story and my story of this church and you as an individual is not a story about how you decided to be a good person and impact your community. It's that you saw that you were broken and dead. Your only hope was the cross of Jesus. You received Him, and now He has called you to be a pioneer of your faith. This is the story, Hillcrest, that we're being called into. But here's the rub. This is not the narrative that we're fed for brunch every day. Now, I know I do this a lot, and Peyton warned me, but I'm going to do it anyway. Some of you love watching children's movies with your kids and grandkids, your siblings. I can see it on your faces. You love it. So don't judge me for judging this one. I think I've mentioned it before, so I know it's safe. But a few years back, one of the biggest grossing movies in Disney history was Frozen 2. And great movie, very inspiring, all that. We went to see it in the movies, and so I have the curse of theologizing everything. And Peyton will tell you that. We do that in the car. We process everything through the lens. And so we go see this movie, and it's about these two girls. One's 21, one's 24. There's 24-year-olds in this undisclosed Nordic country. Apparently they have no real drive or aim in life or goals. And so they're just kind of walking around, hanging out. And so then they occasionally save the world. So that's exciting through their voices that are beautiful or something. I don't know. And so one girl can shoot ice out of her hands. It's like Freddy Krueger, but it's more with ice. And she's not as scary. And her name's Elsa. And so Elsa is going through this whole journey of searching for this little voice that she hears out in the woods. Does anyone want to volunteer to do the voice? Do you know the voice? You're laughing right now. Can somebody do it? What is it? See, I told y'all, they know. They know. You think I'm crazy? Right? All right, yeah, we're going to cut that part of the sermon online. And she is following this little voice, like she's hearing this voice and it's calling to her. And it gets to this part where she is finally about to discover the voice. And she says, she realizes this is a spirit and I'm about to engage with this great spirit and it's about to bring deliverance. And y'all, when I'm watching this movie, I'm not going to lie, for about 3 seconds I thought, is Disney about to share the gospel in here? Like, this is awesome. Some rogue guy went off on the deep end and off the deep end as a Christian and was like, I'm just going all in and we're going to put it in the movie. And I thought, she's about to meet Jesus on here. And she's about to find deliverance and it's going to be awesome. She goes in and it's a huge, kind of ice wall and it's kind of a depiction of her mother. And basically what happens is her mother says, you are the one that you've been waiting for all of your life. And the message, it was a message of self-actualization and self-importance and self-discovery and realizing all the answers that you're looking for are inside yourself. That is the brunch that we're fed daily. And if not from Disney, by yourself. But listen, people make terrible gods. You know why? Because you can't deliver yourself. And if you believe in a God that's just like you, I can't believe in a God that doesn't do this, this, and this, and this. You don't believe in a God, you just want to believe in yourself. That's what you're doing. You just call it God, but you're your God. And the issue with that is you can't deliver you from anything. I'm not condemning Frozen 2. You're welcome to watch that today. We may watch it for movie night tonight. But the point is this: when you spend your whole day hanging out with an unnatural reindeer and another guy who works with ice all day and has no direction in life either, you probably don't have the answers that you're looking for. Moses didn't either, because he's in a worse spot. And God comes to him. This is the craziest part about the Bible, is that it constantly talks about how broken and sinful. This guy's a murderer. He buried the body. How many murderers do we have in here where you buried the body and hid for 40 years? And went out and married some priest's daughter and didn't even tell him probably. And God approaches him? Not just approaches him with salvation, but with purpose. Calls him to be a pioneer of the faith and to lead people out of slavery. God approaches us. When he comes to him as a burning bush, God is revealing himself through fire. He does this all the time in Scripture. Hebrews chapter 12 says that God is a consuming fire. He is a refining fire. He's a fire that comes in. But here's the cool part, is that the bush wasn't burned up. What does that mean? God is he's the God of a consuming fire, a power, a glory that is emanating white hot holiness. It burns up everything around him. And yet, the bush isn't consumed. So he is the all-powerful God, but he's also the all-loving, all-compassionate, delivering God. That he is white-hot holy, but he is also solidly for your good. He is the God of deliverance, not just destruction. And then the staff, he says, throw it on the ground, Moses. And Moses throws his staff on the ground, which, by the way, is a nod to the power sticks of Egypt, that every ruler had a power stick. It's actually where Harry Potter gets their inspiration for magic wands. It's in Egyptian folklore where all of the gods had different staffs and reeds, and they were like a shepherd's staff, and they ruled with a scepter. And that's where this comes from. And he says, throw it on the ground, and as if to say, I am God even over your enemies. I'm God over these great powers that you learned about, these unseen powers that you learned about in Egypt, not just the Pharaoh, but their gods. And then he says, put your hand inside of your jacket and then take it out, and he has leprosy, the death disease, and then he puts it back in, and then it's back to normal. And God's not just working on his birthday magic tricks, all right? He is actually saying, I am the God over life and death, and he is foreshadowing the plagues that he's about to perform. He is the Almighty and the Most High God. And so when you get to chapter 4, and Moses says, but behold, they won't believe me or listen to my voice. And he says, what's in your hand, Moses? God can take what is seemingly worthless or seemingly insignificant, and he can throw it on the ground, and he can turn it into anything he wants to. It's called conferred power. He touches it and it becomes valuable. It's like when LeBron James, if you had a LeBron James jersey, which by the way, he's not the GOAT, Jordan is, but that's a different sermon as well. But if you went up to Dick's Sporting Goods, got a LeBron jersey, and you bought it and you wore it, okay, it's not worth a whole lot. In fact, it lost worth because you wore it and you probably sweated on it, especially you middle schoolers. But then if you went and took it to LeBron to wear for a game and he signed it, you know how much that jersey is going to be worth? A whole lot more. You know why? Because there is conferred power. Greatness has touched the ordinary and now become extraordinary. That's what God is doing with the staff, and he's doing it with Moses in this moment, and he wants to do that with our church. It's not what's in your hand as much as it is about being in God's hand. Are we in God's hand? As one pastor said, you are the unlit torch and God is the burning bush, and he's saying, tilt your flickering torch to me and you can take the light of God to a desperate world. And so, as we sort of land the plane this morning, I just want to say, the book of Hebrews talks about, especially in chapter 3, talks about how Jesus is a greater Moses. Jesus comes as the greater deliverer. Moses was worthy of some glory because he does deliver, as we'll see in our series, he delivers the people. But Jesus has come and he has offered deliverance from sin. We're no longer slaves in Egypt, we are slaves to sin. and your only deliverer is Jesus Christ. You cannot pay the debt that you owe. It will take everything you have to pay it. And then your accounts will be empty and hopeless. The guy who was here last week, Dr. Gary Cook, former president of Dallas Baptist, he came and said some kind words and read from Joshua last week. When I went to Dallas Baptist, I went to go as a student worker, and I sort of worked my way up and became a donor relations officer. And so I went to go see one of our donors. And when I got there, I didn't have a car. I'd been saving up every dime that I had. I was a very poor college student. My mom's single mom teacher. So I saved every dime that I had, put it in my bank account, and I was thinking, okay, this is for my car. I don't have a car. I'm a junior in college. I don't have a car. So this is going to be for my car. And I borrowed my supervisor's car to go see this donor. She was awesome. She was a great lady, such a godly woman. I pull up to the nursing home, and I try to put my foot on the brake, and I accidentally slammed on the gas. So you parents with college students, you watch out, all right? And I slammed on the gas, and I tore into that nursing home and crushed the front of my supervisor's Volvo, ripped the gate off the side, and I was panicked. There's green liquid all over the ground. And so I called my supervisor and said, hey, I wrecked your Volvo. And she started laughing. She said, that's okay. How's she doing? Did y'all get to visit yet? And I said, I haven't seen her yet. I just wrecked your Volvo. And she said, are you serious? And I said, yes. And so long story short, I was terrified that my insurance was going to go up. I heard that sermon a lot growing up from my mom. So I thought, okay, I've got to keep my insurance down. So what do we do here? So I talked to her and I said, okay, I have this money saved up. It's everything that I have. But if I pay for the repairs, I think it might be enough. I don't know. And guess what? She talked to the shop, and it was the exact amount that I needed to pay. But it took every penny out of my account. I had nothing, and I paid it. And they graciously allowed us to do that without having to go through insurance companies. I was so thankful, but I was toast. I was without hope. Had no hope of getting a car after that. So the next day, Dr. Gary Cook calls me down to his office. And I'm thinking, well, lost my bank account yesterday, and now I'm about to lose my job. Because who runs into a nursing home when you're going to see a very generous millionaire who gave $9 million to our school? So I walk in, shortest meeting of my life that I've ever had. I walk in, Dr. Cook's smiling, and then he kind of gets real serious. He goes, you got to watch out for those nursing homes, son. He said, they'll jump right out in front of you. And then he walked over to me and he handed me a check. And I looked at the check. It took me a second. And he said, go ahead and cash that quickly. And he said, have a good day, Jordan. And then he walked back into his office. I'm thinking, man, I can't believe it. The school's going to pay for that. That's crazy. And I looked down, and it wasn't from the school. It was from he and his wife, their personal bank account. And he had called my supervisor to ask me how much it was, and found out that I used every bit of the money that I had to my name, and he paid my debt. And you know what I had after that? I had some hope. And I felt like I had some new purpose, not only to avoid every nursing home from here to the Mississippi, but to work even harder for that man. And to be loyal to him, because he paid a debt that I couldn't pay. How much greater debt? You have no hope of paying your spiritual debt that you owe today. But you know who does? God. And he did not withhold even his own son to pay your debt. So if you don't know Jesus today, today's the day. That's not just a fact that you hear and you download and understand. It's not something you just agree with. You have to surrender to that in prayer. So if you want to surrender your life to Jesus today, we will have staff here at the front. We'd love to talk to you. And you can do that right now. My son did it last week. We had two 20-year-olds over here in the part of the church, and they hadn't been to church in a while, and they both raised their hand to receive Jesus last week. That can happen to you today. Maybe for some of you, though, you're a Christian. Many of you, maybe even most of you in this room are believers. But it is time for you to remember that you are a pioneer. I had a place that I used to preach at on Sunday nights. I'm going way too long here, but we're just going to do it. And I went down and I would preach. And I had a kid who came up to me one week and he said, "You didn't share the gospel today. You share the gospel every week and you didn't share the gospel today at the end." And I said, "Well, I share the gospel here." And he said, "Yeah, but you didn't give an invitation." He said, "I worked so hard to get my friend here. He's never come. And he finally came and you didn't share." And I felt terrible. For about 2 weeks, I felt so bad. And then 2 weeks later, he came and he said, "Hey, we were talking over coffee yesterday, and I just was trying to answer some questions and engaging." And he listened, and I said, "Hey, you could have Jesus today. Do you want to give your life to Jesus?" And you know what he said? He said, "Yes." He said, "I'm so sorry." He said, "I just wanted you to know that, one, I'm sorry, but two, I think I was asking you to do something that God called me to do." Church, I'm an okay preacher, like okay. That's not to get compliments from you. I'm serious. I'm an okay preacher. Your friends know you. The people you go to at the gas station, at H-E-B, at the gym, at your family reunions, at your work this week, they know you. And so God has called you to be a pioneer, to take the light, to be a burning bush, because you've encountered the ultimate burning bush in heaven. And so maybe today you've given your life to Jesus, but it's time to put your life on the line and say, "God, I need you to make me consecrated again for your purposes." Consecrate on Wednesday night was just not, it wasn't a 2-hour moment or an hour and a half moment to just consecrate. Now we're done. This is a season of reconsecration. It's a season of renewal. Will you come to the altar today and ask God, bring a face that I can share the gospel with, that I can invite into my life with, and just to love. Maybe there's something that you need to give financially that you've been holding back because you're afraid to give it to God. The more resources we have as a church, the more generous we get to be as a church. My commitment to you is that I will be honest and transparent about how we use it. You know why? Because my mom ties to this church and she'll beat me if I don't. But today's the day for recommitment. Today's the day for renewal, a reigniting of the flame. Amen, church? So let me pray. We're going to give it to God. God, this is your time. This is your word. You are still that burning bush that does not consume the plant. You are God of power. You are God of wrath, and yet you are the God of love and mercy, so that you poured out your wrath on your Son so that we could have mercy. You poured the fire out on your Son so that we could have the bush that's not consumed. God, this is your time. Call us back to be pioneers again. In Jesus' name, amen.